Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of this tutorial on mixing intimate sounding modern pop vocals. If you haven't checked out part 1, then you can do that now. In part 1 we talk about compression, EQ, de-essing and various different techniques that you can use to shape a vocal just using the tools available in Logic Pro. In this part we're going to be looking at the effects available to us, reverbs, delays, etc. And how to really kind of turn this vocal into something great. So as I said before in part 1, if you're not a Logic user, it doesn't necessarily matter. You can still apply these techniques to basically any plugins. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to be looking at the power that is available in the Logic stock plugins and how we can use that to create some great sounding vocals. So let's jump straight back into it and see what we can do. So picking up from where we left off before, we have this vocal track here which sounds like this.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner.
Which is okay, but it's kind of bland, it's kind of dry. We want to add some reverbs to it, give it some space, and really get into that kind of ethereal, dreamy sounding pop vocals. So you'll notice that in this vocal chain, we have 5 different effects buses, and these are the ones that we're going to be using today to achieve that. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this one that says chorus. Now, you'll notice that we have the chorus plugin, and then we have this sample delay plugin. Now, the reason for that is because I like to kind of have a choice when it comes to vocals as to, how do we add more width? So I'm actually going to disable the chorus in this instance and just name this one width, because I really like this sample delay for adding exactly that, which is more width to the vocals. So if I just dial some of this in, you'll see the sample delay is really easy to use. It just has a left and a right, and we're just delaying this left-hand side by 9 milliseconds and the right by around 30. You can change this to suit, but let's just take a listen to what that does in solo and then in context with the track. So this is all the way up.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt. You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one.
So that's just adding like a real subtle dimension to it and making the vocal feel kind of bigger than it was before, which really helps to increase that sort of feeling of intimacy and that the vocal is up closer to us, because now the vocal feels wider. The reason I'm not using the chorus plugin in this instance is just because I feel like the chorus makes it a bit too modulated and a bit kind of blurry. That's not really what I'm going for. I want something which is clean, wide, and just has a bit more dimension to it. So next up in the chain, we have the vocal verb. The plugin that I'm using in this case is Verb. Now, Verb's been in Logic for ages, and obviously Logic has added Chroma Verb and Space Designers in there as well. Both of those offer loads of flexibility and some great sounding reverbs, but for me, Verb is a classic and it sounds really good. So I'm going to dial some of this in. My first thing really is to kind of have like a long reverb that's going to fill the space, and I'm hoping that this is going to be able to do that. So let's dial in a bit of Verb and see what it does.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt. This time it's not my turn. You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know.
So what we're trying to achieve with this reverb is to just kind of fill that space around the vocal. In this case, I've got about 30 millisecond pre-delay, which is just allowing the vocal some time before the reverb actually kicks in. I kind of want this reverb to almost sound a bit artificial, a bit like a plate, so that it's not, I don't want it to feel like the vocal's necessarily in a room that's like an identifiable space. I want it to be this ethereal sort of feeling around the vocals. So this is kind of good for that. We've got a big sounding reverb and then, quite a long pre-delay that just gives the vocals some time to cut through. You'll also notice that I have this EQ going on, which is just carving out some of the low mids and some of the higher mids. As well as this high shelf, just dialing out some top end. Now this is just to give the vocal some space. If I play it again and turn the EQ on and off, you'll notice that it kind of becomes a bit cloudy and a bit too full sounding, that reverb. So it looks like quite an extreme EQ, but it's just allowing me to kind of give the vocal a little bit more space and the reverb not to actually get in the way of that.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner.
So it just thins out that reverb a little bit. What I'd like to do is just add in a De-Esser before that reverb, actually, because I feel like there's still some sibilance issues, but it's more in the reverb than it is in the actual vocals. So let's just see how this sounds.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full. No, I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You do all. That makes me a sinner.
So that's just taking out some of that extra brightness in the reverb. And just, again, this is all about making sure that the reverb's not getting in the way of the vocal. So moving on to the next bus we have here, we've got one called Room. Now, I don't want to place too much of a room sound around the vocal. As I said earlier on, like I feel like I want it to feel up close and I want it to feel sort of super, super in my ear. I don't want it to necessarily feel like she's kind of way back in a room, but this is just going to, again, add some more width and just take a little bit of the staleness away from the vocal. This vocal was recorded in a super dead vocal booth. So this is really just to add a bit more life to the vocal. So let's see what this does. If I just mute the other two sends a sec and we'll take a listen to what this room verb's doing.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt. You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a win.
So here there, like you only really need a very small amount to really change the feel of the vocal. I don't want to push it too far because then it does sound kind of roomy and a bit like she's in the bathroom, which is totally not what I'm going for. I just want to have this like a feeling of space around the vocal. So you only need a small amount here. I'll just do that again, turn that on and off, and you can hear how that's affecting the vocal.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to...
I feel like we can probably take a little bit more mid-range out of this longer verb as well. I feel like that's around here somewhere is just a little too... it's kind of ringing a touch.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one.
Cool. So now I feel like I want to add some a little bit more vibe, a little bit more interest to this vocal. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the tape delay, and I'm just going to send to that. I'm going to set the send all the way up, and then we'll just bring that back and see where that sits. So let's go to 0 with that and hear that tape delay.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's. You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games.
So my first thought there is like that's filling in the gaps quite nicely, but it feels a bit irritating. So I feel like that it needs probably another de-esser on there just to really sort of calm down that sibilance. Again, let's take a listen.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. Like that feels better already. But now what I want to do is I kind of want to blur the delay a bit. So one way of doing that is to use another instance of Silververb, and in this case we're again going for a kind of room sound, but we're going to mix in 50% of the dry signal, 50% of the wet signal. So the dry signal here is actually not the dry vocal. The dry signal here is the delay, the 100% tape delay, which is on this one. We've got no dry signal coming into the tape delay from the original vocal track. This is just the wet delay track. And then 50% of this now is going to be 50% of the delay and 50% reverb from this new reverb plugin. So what that's going to do is that's just going to kind of blur that delay a bit and push it back into the space so that we're not hearing it quite so clearly, because I feel like it's kind of getting in the way of the vocal touch. So let's turn that on and take a listen to what that does.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we get. You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. Makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt.
So that really adds like a space to that delay, and it makes it feel way more kind of like an echo, I guess, than just a straightforward delay. And it helps it sit behind the vocal a lot more. But one more thing I want to do is just add the chorus plugin to this track now, to this bus, sorry. So what this is going to do is add a bit more width to that whole thing, and it's going to kind of make it a bit blurrier, a bit more modulated, and help to push it back even further into the mix. So let's take a listen to that.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt. This time it's not my turn. You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know me, a sinner. You don't know how to say.
So I don't want too much of that because I feel like it makes it ring a touch, but that sounds pretty good so far. So let's just take a listen quickly with all of those effects on, and then I'll turn them all off and we'll see the difference between A and B.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt. This time it's not my turn.
Cool, so the last thing that I want to add is this down here, this PP delay, which is the ping pong delay. Now this is just going to give us a bit of excitement from left to right and help the vocal move around a touch without sort of occupying that space in the center where everything else is. So I'm going to use the stereo delay for this one, and both sets are eighth note delays as opposed to the quarter note delay of the tape delay. And then we just have a deviation of this one of minus 10%, so they're just slightly off of each other. And then you see that there's some filtering going on as well. So let's take a listen to that.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get.
So that's pretty cool. That adds like quite a lot of width and quite a lot of dynamic around the vocal, but it's getting in the way too much. So I have this EQ now, which is quite serious, a lot of carving going on here. We're taking out a lot of that lower mids, and also have this low pass filter as well. So that's just going to help take a lot of the top end off of that delay. Let's take a listen with that on now.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt. This time it's not my turn.
So that really helps to sit in a pocket just behind the lead vocal rather than it being like right up where the lead vocal is. And I think that's really important with a lot of these delays and reverbs, is to don't be afraid to really get at them with an EQ or any kind of shaping, just to really help them sit around the vocal, because it's important. You know, the vocal is the most important thing here, and you can end up swamping the whole track with effects if you're not kind of thinking about where these things occupy the space. So as you can see, you know, the vocal was, when we did in part one, what we were trying to do was boost the top end of that vocal. So what that's going to mean is that a lot of the reverbs are going to be brighter than they normally are. So, you know, we're taking away top end in the reverb, we're taking away top end in the delay, because we want the vocal to occupy that top end. Don't necessarily want the reverb to be there as well. Same goes for the low mids. The low mids in the vocal are a real part of kind of making that vocal sound upfront and personal, and as if it's quite nice and thick and warm. That's gonna also end up in the reverb, and we don't want too much of that, or else you start to kind of lose the bass in the track and you start to swamp that lower mid range. So don't be afraid to really carve out a lot of this like we have done, and really help it to have its own space, that lead vocal. So let's take a listen to all of that now with the backing vocals back in and see what we've done.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games are full, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt. This time it's not my turn.
Cool. So I think that sounds pretty good. For a verse vocal, we've added a lot more depth to it, a lot more dynamic, just through adding some very simple plugins that are available in Logic straight off. And like I say, if you want to use your own plugins to recreate this, you can do that. That's absolutely fine. The process is still the same. You know, take away the stuff that you don't need from the vocals, from the reverb, and make sure that you're letting that vocal shine all the time. So one more recap over what we've done. We've added some width to this vocal using the sample delay plugin just to give it some more depth.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner.
Super subtle, we're not trying to make it really wide and really kind of chorusy. I'm not trying to create this kind of doubler effect. I'm just adding a bit of width that you can feel. Then we have the room plugin. Silver Verb, the Silver Verb plugin to create this kind of room reverb and just give some space around the vocal. So on and off with that.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games
just gives a bit more life to the vocal. And adding stuff that wasn't there before. Like I say, it was recorded in a really dead vocal booth, so just gives it a bit more life. If you've recorded your vocals in a room, just in a bedroom or something where there's some natural reverb, then you might not need to add that, adjust it to taste. But I felt like these vocals needed a bit of life, and that really helps with that. So, and then next up we have the vocal verb, which is there just to kind of fill in the gaps between the vocal and add that sense of feeling and sort of ethereal kind of movement to that vocal. So let's hear that.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games I fall, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'm never.
And then we have this tape delay that we've used along with Silver Verb and the chorus plugin just to make it a bit blurrier and sit it behind the vocal. And this is just kind of adding in some more interest, filling in those gaps in the vocal.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games I fall, no one's a winner.
And then we have this heavily EQ'd ping pong delay just to add some kind of width and a bit more dynamic in the left and right to that vocal.
You say you don't remember, but I recall it all. That makes me a sinner. You don't know how to surrender. These games I fall, no one's a winner. We're falling a little deeper every time we're getting closer, but I know that I'll never be the one. And it all comes down to who's gonna get screwed first, who's gonna get hurt. This time it's not my turn.
So hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully you found some techniques and tricks that you can use in your own mixes. If you like this, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, leave a comment below. Let me know what plugins you like to use when you're creating your own vocal sounds and so on. I will be dropping a link to this vocal chain in the description below, so you'll be able to download that and use that in your own sessions. If you have any other questions regarding this video or anything else you want to see, then just hit me up. And yeah, I'll see you soon.